at David Security here once again on June 16th, providing security insights and updates. And today I want to focus on Tunisia. Now, the Tunisian Prime Minister has gone on TV and said, you know what, we've beaten COVID. Now, it takes a lot of courage and foresight to say something like this, especially in light of the fact that this is a new virus, something that we're still learning from, and there are countries with a lot more resources and a lot more as far as money and minds to throw at this virus, and they haven't been able to announce this victory. So Tunisia, the little country in North Africa, population under 12 million, has announced that it has beaten the virus. Prime Minister went on TV on Sunday and announced the victory that they have achieved over the virus. And they said they've come out of the crisis with really important health consequences and the least damage. The health ministry stated that the number of cases in the country totaled 1,096 and the death toll remained at 49, while recoveries had reached 998. Now, this is true for most countries. The recovery rate is pretty high unless you're focused on the very high risk segment of the population. Now, so this is pretty big news for Tunisia. Now, Tunisia is trying to position itself for its tourist season, and Tunisia is a country that depends heavily on tourism. So that may be some factors on why they've decided to go so public with this. Now, we have to also say that Tunisia has made some strides and really some success stories, some stories to focus on that makes Tunisia unique in how they approached this virus. Now, let's just look at one example here. This is an example here that shows how Tunisia came together to, quote unquote, win over this virus. Now, Tunisia workers here isolated in a factory, and these ladies, this is a pretty remarkable story. We posted it on the Facebook page, Tunisia Security Update. These ladies decided on their own, they decided to quarantine themselves, to lock themselves up in a factory and just pump out masks. That was pretty admirable to see. And this story went around the world. 150 people, mostly women, isolated themselves in a factory for a month to make protective gear like masks. These were the kind of stories that were coming out of Tunisia that were very impressive and showed not only their focus, but also their ability to come together as a country. I think that factor needs to be taken. Other stories, other colorful stories that came out of this whole event was that stories like this one, where Tunisia was enforcing curfews and lockdown, kind of similar to other countries that took strong measures to enforce the curfew. Tunisia put out these robots here. There are a lot of videos online you can see the robot going out there asking people for their ID. So these types of stories, on one side they showed Tunisia's strong approach, but on the other side they showed that this little country in North Africa has a lot of resources, and creative ones at that. So that was a very creative response on the Tunisian side. Now, if we look at the travel, Tunisia reopening borders to all tourists starting June 27th. So Tunisia is officially reopening its borders, allowing tourists from all countries and destinations to enter on June 27th. Again, as we stated, this information here, pretty much, I think it's to position the country, because the Prime Minister did mention in his remarks that the country will reopen on June 27th. It's fair to say that Tunisia already will discount this tourist season as a loss, but they have to think long term. They have to think of all the segments of their economy. And that brings us to the topic of risks and risk monitoring, and especially for companies operating in Tunisia. We've seen a lot of positive news of Tunisia in terms of their response to COVID, their creative approach and solutions on how to enforce things, on their reliance on their security network on the ground and so forth. But we also have to take into account that there's been an uptick in protests in Tunisia. So a lot of socio-economic challenges remain in Tunisia. If you haven't kept up with the news there, it's pretty much under the radar, but it can escalate pretty quick. As someone that lived there for over a decade and monitored the situation, I know firsthand how fast things can change on the ground. If you want to see the risk level in Tunisia, just look at it in a map, and you can see how with the Libyan situation, how fast things can get out of hand. Speaking of which, the U.S. commander recently suggests sending military trainers to Tunisia after Russia sends aircraft to Libya. So the situation in Libya is pretty hard to monitor because it changes almost by the hour. However, as someone that covers Tunisia in terms of risk management and security developments, I could tell you that the situation is fluid and it is connected in many ways. Now, U.S. Army trainers to Tunisia, they're talking about this. There's a lot of politics in this, a lot of rumors and hearsay, but the fact of the matter is that the situation in Libya is unstable, and that's an understatement. And because it borders Tunisia, it does have an effect. Now, Fakhfakh issued a statement afterwards, after these remarks were said, and they're just basically saying what we want to hear. A top U.S. Air Force commander warned last week that if Russia establishes coastal bases in Libya, the Kremlin could introduce long-range air defense, possibly denying NATO full access to its southern flank. So, I mean, this is pretty big scale in terms of geopolitics, in terms of not just North Africa, but when we look at Europe as well. And, you have Chinese interests, a lot going on here in North Africa. But it's just something else to monitor. The point is this, folks, just to wrap up this video here and keep it short. The point is that Tunisia has announced victory over the coronavirus. Good job, Tunisia. Knock on wood for Tunisia. They took a very creative, collective approach, and that's what I think was the heart of their response, and it needs to be commended. They also took security measures, and it showed that Tunisia has some organization on the ground level. They've gotten a lot of criticism about their security responses for various incidents. So this type of collective, unified and professional approach was much appreciated on the international stage. Tunisia is positioning itself for its tourist season. It's heavily reliant on tourism. It's made the announcement that all tourists are welcome starting June 27th, which I think has a lot to do with this other news that we've seen here. However, all this good news aside, it needs to be taking into account that the socio-economic situation in Tunisia is not stable. It can flare up in any minute. We do have a large portion of the population that is not content with the current political status. It's not to say that they will resort to violence. Tunisians are typically peaceful, family-loving people, but they can take to the street and disrupt business, and other groups can take advantage of that, especially groups and bad guys that may pour over through the borders in Libya that Tunisia has with Libya. So complex situation. However, with good monitoring, collective information, and awareness, you can navigate, operate, and even visit Tunisia safely. So that's it for today. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you have any concerns or comments. At David Security here, reminding you to stay safe, visit Tunisia, and take care of yourself.